I'd like to call this meeting of the Carson City Historic Resources Commission on Thursday, September 10th, 2020 at the Sierra Room to order. Can we have a roll?
Chairperson Drews.
Here.
Vice Chair Darney. Here. Commissioner Block.
Here.
Commissioner Hayes.
Here.
Commissioner Schmitter. Commissioner Schmidt. Commissioner Spielda.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you, Danielle. Let's see, the meeting is actually going on at starting at 4:30 this afternoon so that we could make a visit to the Bank Saloon is our first item. So what we'll do is,
Do you want to do the public comment in the minutes and then the site visit? There's just a couple, okay.
that's exactly where I was going. Oh. So I think what we'll do is we'll review the minutes, do public comment, do the minutes, and then we'll move on to agenda items. So the first item is public comment. Members of the public who wish to address the commission may do so at this time. Due to the COVID restrictions, the public may wish to view the meeting live stream. All the links are on the city webpage. If you'd like to provide public comment, written comments can be submitted to the planning department, or you can join live by phone at the numbers listed at the on the community development website. Is there any public comment?
There is no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Hearing none, we'll move to item C for possible action, approval of minutes from July 9th, 2020. Has everyone had a chance to review those? We'll entertain a
I
motion.
move to approve the minutes of July 9th, 2020.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item D, modification of the agenda. Items on the agenda may be taken out of order. The public body may combine two or more agenda items for consideration, and the public body may remove an item from the agenda or delay discussion relating to an item at any time. Is there any modifications? Hope?
There are no modifications to the agenda.
Thank you. Next item is E, our site visit. I think what we'll do is go into recess and reconvene at the front entrance to Bank Saloon at around, well, let's all try to be there by 4:45. And then I think we're going to have a quick tour and review the items on meeting one. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, we'll recess till sometime around 5:30. Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting of the Carson City Historic Resources Commission back to order. Next item is item F1, HRC-2020-0025 for possible action, discussion, and possible action regarding a request to construct a patio, trash enclosure, shed, screen wall, and fencing, as well as install signage on properties owned downtown mixed use, DTMU, located at 418 South Carson Street, APN 003-116-05. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject property is the Bank Saloon. The subject building was constructed in 1899 and was formerly Jack's Bar. HRC reviewed the improvements to the building at its meeting of May 2019. At that time, the applicant proposed a wooden trellis in the rear. Since that time, the applicant has refined the plans to include a 9,000 square foot patio, a trash enclosure, a shed, a screen wall. The applicant is also proposing signage. The commissioners just had the opportunity to view the site and to see the locations where the trash enclosure, the patio, the screen wall, and the trash enclosure are proposed. In terms of the shed and the trash enclosure, I've looked at the Development Standards 5.26, which actually address additions to historic buildings. As we know, these improvements will not be touching the building, but I believe this is the applicable section of the design standards. These guidelines explain that additions must be compatible in their configuration, design, style, scale, materials, and architectural details with distinctive character defining features of the building. The additions also have to be done in a manner that they do not destroy significant original historical or architectural material and if removed in the future, will not impair the essential form and integrity of the building, nor the historic fabric. The trash enclosure, shed, and screen wall are not additions to the building. These improvements are understated in scale, and they will not compete with the distinctive characteristics and features of the building. They also will not destroy significant original historic material, nor will they impair the essential integrity of the building. In looking at development standards for fencing, we look at development standards 5.24. The design guidelines advise that a fence may not be constructed in a manner that will adversely affect the primary views of the building. Fences should also be designed to enhance the overall visual presentation of the building and shall be made from materials which are traditionally associated with fences in the district, including wrought iron. The fence is primarily in the rear of the building, thus will not adversely affect any primary views of the building. The fence is also proposed to utilize construction materials similar to wrought iron, thus utilizing a material associated with the district. Development Standards 5.23 address signs. The design standards say that signs must have the appearance, color, size, texture, and design which conform to the historic character of the district. Signs should closely match stylistically with the architectural style of the building. The location and methods of attachment will be considered. The applicant is proposing 2 signs. There is a third sign, but it's on an adjacent property, which is to the west of the site and is not in the district. The 2 signs in the district are first a sign on Carson Street. That's the sign that's up on the screen. It's the larger of the 2 signs. This sign on Carson Street is proposed to be 2 feet by 3 feet and made of wood with vinyl lettering. The sign on Fifth Street is proposed to be an acrylic face sign, so that's the sign on the right side, sign number 2. And that sign's proposed to be 14 inches by 14 inches. So that would be on Fifth Street. Overall, staff finds that these improvements are consistent with the design guidelines for the district and does recommend approval. Aaron West, the Executive Director of the Builders Alliance, is, I believe, in the room virtually and can speak more specifically to this matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Hope. Just for clarification, I think Hope said it was a 9,000 square foot patio. It's a 900 square foot patio. It's just an extra digit, not a big deal. Are there any commission member questions of Hope or Adam? I see you're on the screen.
I'm here if you need me.
I have a question for you. Is this lot split? So half of it's in the historic district and half of it's not?
It's existing 2 lots, and if you had a chance on the site visit to look at the rear wall of the Roca building, the property line is just off that wall.
I just want to make one comment about the application, is that the site plan doesn't reflect what we saw out there on the site very accurately. Not that I'm aware of. Am I wrong? The back of the building with the wood structure they built.
Actually, I think where the structure is now, existing structure, or the new structure, and the one that's proposed to the east of that is existing, the existing building. That's where the property line is.
No, I'm talking right to the back of the old bar.
Yeah,
The rock wall, the old bar is
the
straight.
rock wall is here.
Right,
This part of the building
right,
is existing.
right.
They faced that wall.
But then the left-hand side of it doesn't reflect what's there.
I posted the site plan on the board, so just for the benefit of the audience as well. So this, where I have the cursor, is essentially the rear wall of the existing bar.
Right.
And you have a property line right here.
Mm-hmm.
The patio will be in this area, as he described. Then you have where there's a wooden screen wall That, where my cursor is.
That's what I'm talking about.
That
Where is
screen
that
wall.
represented on here?
Oh, I'm sorry, hold on.
That's not
My slide
represented on the
changed.
site plan.
Sorry, I had to go back to my slide. Okay, so the screen wall, which is along this, is touching the wall, is screening the wall of the adjacent building. And then it's continuing,
Oh, I know where it is.
Right.
I'm not questioning where it is. I'm just representing the fact that the site plan given us is not accurate.
it's not calling it out clearly.
It's accurate, it's not calling it out as clearly as you'd
Right.
like to see it.
And then this improvement here is the shed. So the screen wall continues from blocking this building to becoming part of the shed. And then adjacent to the shed would be the trash enclosure.
Okay.
Just for clarification, under the discussion of the walls, it references sandstone block in here 3 or 4 times, and it's all rhyolite. It came out of a quarry in Brunswick Canyon.
You're referring to the existing building?
Yes.
Thank you.
Greg, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a question. On the main sign on Carson Street, if you look at the cross-section, looking at the side view, that skinny little thing to the right of the sign on the materials we have, yeah, and it's on the screen, it says white LEDs in the middle. So I'm wondering about lighting, how we're using white LEDs, what am I going to see, and what are the rules for that matter,
Aaron, do you want to speak specifically to the lighting? I believe it's an internal lighting.
Yeah, thank you for letting me address this. So the idea would be that we are wanting to use the black walnut to face the sign, but at night we would like to also be able to see the logo. So the idea is that we would cut the logo, the Bank Saloon logo, through the black walnut, and then have white acrylic behind that, and essentially create a space on either side of the, both sides would be the walnut, and we'd create a space in between there where we would have LED lights. So you'd have the white acrylic so that when it's lit, the logo, the Bank Saloon name would be lit in white through the wood.
So what it, let's see here, green, here we go.
I think he's
So
saying
what
just
is
the word
white on
saloon.
like outlining the B and the A and the N and the K, that would be where the acrylic light source comes through?
Yes,
So you're,
right.
right, and then the word saloon would totally be, totally in white in terms of what we see, that would also be the lit
Yes.
part. Okay, and
Yes.
I don't know, Hope, what's the deal in terms of lighting? We've talked about lighting in Hearst Historic District signs and that kind of thing. There are some guidelines.
I'm going back to my guidelines right now. One sec. Okay. I did not bring my code, however, I do know that in the district, we do have illuminated lighting. I can think more of exteriorly illuminated as opposed to internally illuminated. I did not see a prohibition on internally illuminated when I was looking at the guidelines and preparing the report, but I can double check on that.
Well, I just recall when we were working with the church and they wanted to do a bunch of signs along Division Street there. One of the issues was whether they could be illuminated or not, externally or versus internally, that whole thing. So I just want to be consistent with what our.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Hope. We're hearing this because the building is listed on the National Register. The historic district actually is on the west side of Curry, correct?
No, the subject property is in the historic district.
So it's been annexed to the district.
It is in the district. I don't know when it was annexed, but it is in the district.
Okay, because I thought we had purview over the listed properties, but if they're outside the district, it's a slightly different animal.
Right, this property is in the district. The parking lot to the rear is not in the district, but the building, where the building is in the district.
Okay, because I think our illumination was written to reflect illumination within the more residential or residential
Right.
office
This is unique
uses
in the sense it's on
within the
Carson Street.
district. This is a
so
commercial,
It's different, so.
a commercial building on a main street, and I think if we're explicit about that use or illumination under that use, I think we might cover that base.
I'm personally fine the way it is. I just don't want others coming back and say, hey, you didn't let us do internal illumination on our sign. We had to do nothing or external, right? So,
Well,
but you're right. That's more residential slash, office.
but we've
type
also allowed
zone.
the LED sign at the Children's Museum and also the one at Yaples Dance Studio because it's right on the thoroughfare. So I don't think we're,
Actually, we didn't approve Yaples.
Yapel didn't apply for that, that was grandfathered in. He just kept the same can.
so you keep the same can, you can, okay.
But that is a good explanation. It was fairly recent that you approved the, yeah, it's almost like a TV screen. I'm not sure what we call that.
And I
I
think with
think-
this, you're accenting the sign and you're not making it a bright sign that's gonna light up the whole corner and everything else that we're kind of afraid of.
The differentiation I make between the Children's Museum and this, though, is it's a reader board also at the Children's Museum. This right here is in the period, I believe, and all they're trying to do is use the LED lights at night so that they can light up some background on bank and then the word saloon. It's not to light up the sidewalk. It's not to create a problem for neighbors. So I actually like the use of the LED and what they've done on this one.
I got a question on the number 2 sign there, the Nevada Builders Alliance. Is that internally lit?
Aaron, do you want to speak to that?
The 14 by 14 sign, the Nevada Builders Alliance sign, is that internally lit?
This is Aaron for the record. Yes, the intent would be, again, we're trying to limit the amount of exterior light. I didn't really like the idea of using exterior lighting onto the sign because then everything in the vicinity gets lit up, whether it's the side of the building and the sidewalk and everything else. So we were trying to minimize the impact of that light by just going with the internally lit so you can just see the logo.
So that sign 1, sign 3, I think they're wonderful, they're great as is, but sign 2, I'd have little problem with the, I realize Nevada Builders Alliance is probably somewhat of a logo, but the sign shape seems like all of a sudden a very modern square in a otherwise period array, of other signage.
Yeah, and I apologize. It's probably not, after looking at the rendering that was provided, I guess I envisioned, much like the front sign, I envisioned using the walnut to actually face that so that it would be essentially a wood face sign with the letters in, with the acrylic so that the letters could be seen at night. Would that help kind
Yeah.
of soften that feel for you?
It's really about the shape, because to me it comes off as a modern type style of sign. What's on the sign itself doesn't really bother me letters-wise, but I think if the sign had maybe a little more of a rectangle shape to it and maybe a little more trim that might have some, curved corner, buff corners at the roundettes or something in the corners that's more period stylistic. That would be my only suggestion.
I also like the idea of using the walnut on that sign too. The others are attractive.
Yeah.
Aaron, this is Don Smith. what you were talking about is if you use the Nevada builder signs, you've got it done, it's going to be very bright on that side of the building. I'm all in favor of what they're talking about now is if you could, I'm not saying you have to mimic the Bank Saloon, but if there could be some type of a bracket, you could make that a little bit more period, make the Nevada builders instead of blue, that the white, and then the walnut around it, if that would work for you. I think that, I honestly believe that when that thing's lit up at night, it's going to detract from what you've done with the building and the windows, and, you know, it's just going to look like a big light bulb out there. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Aaron, I hate
Yeah,
I hate to make this sound like a joke, but when I look at it back from the street view on the bottom right there, it automatically sends men's room to me. I just wanted to, you know, it's not a scientific theory or anything like that. It's just one of those things I thought I'd just put out there.
For the record, Aaron, that was Rob Donnie that said that.
no problem. No, based on the conversation, I'm happy to agree to a modification of that sign to include walnut faces and more of a hanging fixture so that it's more period correct and matches with the one we're doing on the front.
So, Aaron, I also got your attention. The only other thing on your whole project that I just want to ask you about reviewing is what type and color of roofing is going to go on that, the shed, the wood structure in the back.
Yeah, the idea was to use a standing seam metal, just for durability and to kind of break it up so that it didn't look like we were trying to recreate, you know, something from Virginia City.
Could I get a clarification? My question on the shed and the facing of the CMU to the attorney's office next door, that does not lie within the district, correct? That shed is not in the district. The bar is in the district. The shed and the garbage containment area are
Because of the
not.
split lot?
Yes,
Yeah.
you have two APNs, and I heard Hope say one is in the district and one isn't. The one that's not in the district is the parking lot where the shed and the trash enclosure is located.
The facing on half of that wall is within the district.
No, it's not. If you take a look at the site plan, it's not, even the facing is not in the district. If it's held off like they said it is, the property line is the building.
Where the site plan shows the fire pit is the approximate property line.
I thought the property line was the line of the building.
There was, okay, so I
That's what I
thought
thought.
what Mike thought. When I looked at this plan, let me move that microphone. I thought this line here was the property line. That's what I took to be the property line. In the field just now, Mr. West pointed out this line
There.
here, which I had
There.
overlooked, because I was looking at this as the property line. And that's, right.
That's why I wanted clarification. I got confused.
Right, so essentially, this is the line. I was misreading the line. This is the property line, and the community development director just pulled up the city's GIS system, and this line's consistent with the GIS system. So yes, whoever asked the question, is the shed and trash enclosure on the property that's in the historic district? No, it's not. That was my mistake, because I thought this was the property line.
But that wall and overhang is there,
Yeah,
which is on part of it.
The
So it's on
screening
edge
wall
of it,
and the patio and the fencing is on the historic property.
and the roof overhang comes across.
Yeah.
Aaron, I would just go with dark brown standing seam on that, something that blends and doesn't create much contrast.
That sounds exactly the direction we were headed.
Not green.
As long as you promise not to make it blue, I think that's what everybody's concern is.
Done and done.
So I just wanted to raise one concern with the water drainage off that roof onto the stone building at that corner where it gets very close. There's only like a 4-inch trim board between the old building and this new shed. And so we may need to do some kind of gutter or diversion along that face so that it doesn't start impacting the window and the stone wall there, windowsill. So just wanted to bring that up.
Michelle, do you have any comments?
I had a question on where the front sign is being hung. Is that in the same location as the awning was? Historically, there was some hangers up there, right? Or is that where you're putting it?
So, Aaron West for the record. So, with the idea of trying to not jeopardize the integrity of the stone, we're proposing to move the sign down off of this. I think, and honestly, I still have yet to see a picture of the the building when it had an awning, but based on the clips that are coming out of the stone, we assume that that's what that was for. This would be below that, actually, in the wood framed portion between the cast iron column and the window. We'd pull it down into that wood portion so that we could get the electrical in there, so that we wouldn't have to drill into the stone face.
Okay, I didn't see that. I was seeing it on the stone. Okay.
Okay.
But back to the drainage off that shed, that's close, there's a little gap between the shed and the west wall there, but it's pretty close, so maybe without putting a whole big old gutter system in, you just have some little deflector or something on that edge that's really close to the building, whatever is appropriate. It seems like some of it's gonna splatter.
I think a 1-inch baffle or something, Aaron, right at the eave there would
Right.
divert
Yeah,
that
no,
water, or 1 foot, I'm sorry, would divert that water far enough away.
Yeah, and I appreciate the comment. Sorry, my phone cut out, and so I wasn't able to chime in on that. But certainly appreciate the comment and the recognition of that, and we will certainly address that. And yeah, if we need to put some kind of a baffling system. But yeah, I'm trying to get away from something that's too visually impactful, but at the same time, we will definitely address that.
Is there any other questions or comment, Don?
I have one more comment, and I'm not trying to be a pain. I have called Bill several times during this, and Aaron, what you've done there is really spectacular. I really like what's happened with that. It's been in disrepair for decades, and now I think we have something that we can all kind of take some pride in. But I have a concern. This seems to be ask for forgiveness instead of approval submission to us. And I wonder if there's not a disjoint between our building department and the historical district. If we were supposed to take a look at the shed and all these improvements that we're doing before a permit is finally approved, which I believe is the way it's supposed to be, and we have the Builders Alliance that's doing it, and I want to go on record, I've also done it and been caught a couple times myself asking for the forgiveness. But it seems like this is something we kind of don't want to see done. It would. And I know that you want to get it open, and I understand that, but I think we should be thinking, especially in the role that you have in this community, of trying to help builders expedite their projects, and they look at something like this and go, how come Aaron could get that done, and I've got to wait another 45 days? So I just want to bring that up because it is a concern to me.
Yeah, and this is Aaron for the record, and I appreciate the comment, and I'll take the heat on that. Unfortunately, the shed and the trash enclosure, which, for the record, the shed actually is not required to be permitted because it's under the necessary square footage, and so that was all part of the site improvement permit that was submitted, and not necessarily a building permit. So that was certainly we were hustling down this path to try and get the site permit approved so that we could get going on the parking lot improvements. And I reached out to, I actually reached out about the signage, and thankfully Hope caught this and said, by the way, since that portion is in the the district, we need to go to HRC with it. And so and unfortunately, you saw where we were kind of at in the stage of the construction on the parking lot. We really needed to get that screen wall done in order to proceed with that. And honestly, I was trying to figure out how we would actually convey what the intent was without just putting it up and showing you.
I can read your drawing pretty well.
Mr. Chair,
I just wanted to bring it up because this is the type of thing we don't need.
for the benefit of the record, with the clarification on the property line, and again, I was reading that other line as the property line. And so I thought it was subject to HRC. That shed is not on the property that's in the district, therefore it's not subject to review and approval by this commission. The wall that attaches it and that screen wall is subject to review and approval by this commission because that is in the district. The patio is subject to review and approval by the commission. The fencing is, I know the chair on the site visit asked about the lighting. You'll see the report doesn't address the lighting because the lighting's in the parking lot area. So this project's a little, I don't want to say it's confusing because it's not really confusing, but it's two distinct properties, one that's in the district and one that's not, but the development itself kind of blends through both of them. So in fairness to the applicant, that shed, because of the size, as he explained, is exempt from a building permit. And it was my mistake, that's before you. It's not required to be before you.
But everything else was.
The trash enclosure was not required.
No, the fence, the patio.
Fence, the patio, and the screen wall.
Again, I think what they've done is great. We need to eliminate putting you in a bad spot in the future.
Yeah, I think Aaron's explanation and hopes have gone a long way. One of the things we need to remember too is the lighting that we have shows the parking lot lights and those light standards. We were out there, Aaron did discuss the bistro lights that will be in the patio and in the district. So if we want to discuss that, we can. Whoever makes a motion should probably include the 8-foot poles and bistro lights as part of that.
Would those kind of things be considered temporary? Not part of a structure? It's like Christmas lights, isn't it?
If you're sticking poles in concrete and hanging lights off them, I'd say it's more permanent. I mean, if you guys have a problem with it, we can talk about it. If not, we just need to make sure and include it in the motion so that
They're not any more temporary or permanent as they are in the McFadden Plaza.
Aaron, I just wanted to make a comment that it looks like through the whole project, you guys were saying we're going to reuse some of these wood materials. And it's almost like, hey, now we have a use for them. And I think what you did with the adaptive reuse of all that old timber and everything on that shed and the screen, I think it looks awesome.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments? Is there any public comment on this item?
I see no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. I move to approve HRC 2020-025 based on the findings that the request is consistent with the design guidelines for the Historic District and the Secretary of the Interior standards as noted in the staff report, with the addition of the sign for the Nevada Builders Alliance being presented for staff and the chair's review and approval, and that the lighting of the bistro lighting be presented for chairman's approval as well.
The motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions?
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, what I heard the applicant say concerning the sign on Fifth Street was he was willing to modify it to include a walnut finish and make it similar to the hanging sign in terms of just a sign on the wall. He would make it a hanging sign, similar to the fact there's a hanging sign on Carson Street. So I didn't know if the commission wanted that level of detail included in the motion so that the chair understands the expectation.
Can I answer that, part of it? I don't think I'm going to see a need to have it be a hanging sign, just in context with the other signs.
Hopefully I can remember that for a month or so, and we'll be okay.
We're just worried about the next 15 minutes, Mike.
Huh? Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Aaron. It looks great.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much for all
Thanks
your help through this
Thanks for the
process.
tour.
Next item is F2, HRC-2020-0022, for discussion only, presentation on Nevada Women's History Project. Hope.
Okay, I'm going to be turning it over to Kristen Brown, an architectural historian with the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office, Zoanne Campagna, who is with CROTS Environmental Consultants. I'm getting feedback. Okay, and Alicia Barber, who is also with the environmental consultants. And they will give their presentation on a grant project that they're working on Nevada women's history, and they'll be soliciting input from the commission. This will not be for action, but this will be an opportunity for you to hear about their project and provide input. Thank you.
Thanks, Hope. Zoanne, Alicia, who's gonna, or Kristen? There's Kristen. Who's taking it?
Okay, kick off. Are you running the PowerPoint?
Yes, I have your PowerPoint, and I have Kristen's up. I don't know if you can see the screen. Desi in the back room, can we have the PowerPoint on the screen?
Yes. give me
Now
a
we
second.
can see it. So, Zoanne, do you want me to just go ahead? Okay. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you, sort of. This is Kristen Brown with the State Historic Preservation Office. As Hope said, I'm the office's architectural historian. I have a new job last year. You probably already know me from my past job with the office doing Section 106 reviews and other types of review and compliance work. But now I'm the National Register Coordinator, and I took over Jim Bertolini's job as CLG Coordinator. So certainly looking forward to talking with you more about that in the future. And I'm working with the State Register Program, and I'm working with the CCCHP grant program as the technical advisor. And in addition, I'm running any other NPS grants, such as the one we're going to talk about right now. So I'm going to start and do a basic overview of what the project is. And then Zoanne and Alicia are going to talk a little bit more about the public involvement aspect of the project. So I have, Hope, I have my PowerPoint just here on my own computer so that I can, but then you want me to tell you when to advance the slide, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yes, so this grant that we're working on, or we're kind of kicking it off right now, it's a National Park Service grant. It's called an Underrepresented Community Grant. It's administered by NPS. And this type of grant is intended to diversify the type of nominations that are submitted to the National Register of Historic Places. Okay, let me move this around really quick. Okay, so Nevada received one of these grants specifically to research women's history and the suffrage movement in the state and to compile a historic context. It was a competitive request for proposals, and we selected Couts Environmental with Zoanne as principal investigator and Dr. Barber as their subcontractor. So next slide. So the goals of this grant are to identify themes, trends, and histories important to our state pertaining to women's history and suffrage, of course, to increase visibility of those stories and themes, to remember and celebrate women in Nevada, to collect stories of those who participated in the suffrage movement. And this is an important part. A historic context goal is always to help identify important places or historic resources, such as places that might be threatened or resources that might be worthwhile for possible historic designation, preservation, or interpretation. So this grant has kind of a side goal, which is different from the main historic context that we'll be working on. But the additional goal of the grant is to document the suffrage movement as it pertains to the Capitol building, with the idea that we might be able to amend the existing National Register listing for the Capitol to include additional information about the women's suffrage movement that took place in the building or on its grounds. Okay, so next slide. So what is a historic context? So a historic context is a very specific type of document. The guidance for how to compile and organize this type of document is set forth by the National Park Service. A context provides framework for evaluating resources for historic significance. It will identify history, historic themes and timeframes, geographic areas, associated property types, and it will define thresholds for eligibility of those property types. So a historic context also has a public involvement aspect to it. So we are creating different committees. We do have a subject matter expert committee that we're working with of people who are very knowledgeable about women's history. And then we also have the broader community of people who may be using the historic context someday or who might have additional information to contribute. A historic context is not an attempt to capture or write the entire history of something. That would take many books. It's more of a summary in terms of its history. And it's definitely not an attempt for us to dictate any history or say that, we think it happened this way. But a historic context is ultimately a planning tool, something that will assist the community in identifying future survey priorities or research priorities. And it will help the community identify historic resources and nominate them to the National Register. All right, next slide. So this is review for you guys. You already know the National Register is the list of places worthy of preservation or recognizing important places. And of course, just because you're in the National Register doesn't mean you have to have a national level of significance. Something can be listed in the National Register at the local level, state level, or national level of significance. Next. And again, as you know already, something can be eligible for the National Register under 4 different significance criteria: for its historical significance, for its association with an important person or people, for its architectural significance, or for its data potential, which is often used for archaeological sites. Of course, something can be listed in the National Register. It can be a building, a structure, site, object, landscape, or a historic district. And when you have a historic district, a building can either contribute to that district or not contribute. And every contributing building is also considered to be listed in the National Register. In addition to significance, a property also has to have integrity to its period of significance to be eligible. Okay, next slide. So what are the benefits of National Register listing? Of course, we have public awareness and community pride. We have a boost to heritage tourism sometimes, some more information compiled for education and interpretive purposes. It's also a bonus that the process of nominating something to the National Register involves a lot of research and documentation, so you end up having that documentation for posterity. Being listed can help a building or other resource qualify for certain grant programs. And being listed in the National Register and being an income-producing property can also qualify a building to receive federal tax credits for rehabilitation. The Section 106 perk for National Register listing is that listed properties are identified early in the planning process for federally funded projects through Section 106. So again, this is also a review for you guys. You know that the National Register does not protect the resource. It doesn't change property rights, and it doesn't guarantee preservation of the resource. Those types of protections are inherent more in the local designation due to the fact that a historic preservation ordinance at a city level can introduce that type of protection into the code. Okay, so next slide. Just a little bit about a survey. This is a component of this project. And it will also be a component of what this historic context can be used for in the future to inspire additional survey, of course. So a survey is a systematic method of documenting historic resources through fieldwork and research. Of course, it asks the question, what's out there? What do we have? There's different types of surveys. You can do a neighborhood-wide survey. You can do a thematic or targeted survey, much like you would do here with this women's context. You might do a targeted survey of buildings that you believe have some sort of relation to the suffrage movement or women's history. Or you can do an intensive level survey and documentation project that pertains to a single building. During survey, you're documenting not just the history, but the integrity of the resource. And then while surveying, you can evaluate the resource, and you can evaluate it in general, or you can evaluate it under a specific historic context like the one we're going to create. The survey can help identify buildings worthy of designation, and the data from a survey can be used in planning efforts, especially at the local level and certainly within a CLG. So next slide, just a little bit about, again, the types of funding we have in our office. You guys definitely know about the CLG grants from the Historic Preservation Fund, the federal pass-through money that's available to CLGs. It funds both brick and mortar and planning projects. It can fund survey work. It can fund National Register nominations. It can fund design guidelines, ordinance updates, all kinds of things. And then we have our statewide bond-funded grant program called CCCHP, which is the Commission for Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation. And that supports the rehabilitation of historic buildings to be used as cultural centers or museums. And that money is funded by the legislature, and the grant cycle is every 2 years. And those funds are available to governmental entities and nonprofits. And that is a larger pot of money. And so it tends to be used more for brick and mortar work, although it can also be used for planning purposes. Okay, next slide. This is always a good thing to remember and kind of spread the word in the community. And if you can do any outreach along these lines, it's always a good thing. Just a refresher on the preservation tax credits. The 20% federal tax credit for the rehabilitation of a historic resource that's listed in the National Register and that has an income producing use. The project, if you want to do this program, the project has to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And it's a great program, and it doesn't have to be a huge project. It doesn't have to be a substantial rehabilitation. Well, they call it substantial rehabilitation, but the formulas that they use do allow for some smaller projects. We have one right now in Virginia City, and they're doing just really some pretty minimal repairs, but they qualified for the project. So I think it's really important for you as a local government with a National Register district to be reminding property owners that they can take advantage of these 20% tax credits, and sometimes it can help make a preservation project pencil out better. Okay, so next slide, last slide. Just a recap of some of the other programs that the State Preservation Office does. We also run our State Register of Historic Places. We, of course, run the CLG program and help people like you with your preservation goals. We have a site stewardship program that's based in our Las Vegas office. And that program is a network of volunteers that monitors historic sites, especially archaeological sites, to see if they're threatened or damaged. We occasionally are able to offer internships, and we do training and technical assistance to organizations. And of course, we run our GIS-based database of surveyed historic resources, not all historic resources, just those that have already been surveyed. So the last slide is my contact information, and Hope and I communicate quite a bit. And if you guys, now that I'm in the CLG seat, I guess, I'd be happy to, give you guys a training sometime if you have any topics that you want to know more about. Hopefully I can help you out. Or if you just want to talk about the Secretary standards or the grants or anything, just definitely let me know. Any questions? Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kristen. So I just want to say hello, commissioners. Thank you guys so much for having us at your meeting tonight. As Hope mentioned, I'm Zoanne Campana, and I'm the architectural historian at Couts Environmental Consultants. I am based out of Las Vegas, and I am working with Alicia Barber, who will introduce herself. Oh, you're still muted. There you go.
How's that?
Okay, well, looks like Alicia might be having some technical difficulties. I will introduce Alicia Barber. Dr. Barber is a historian, and she is subcontracting with Couts on this project. She is based in Reno. And while she's getting reconnected, let's go ahead on to the next slide. Oh, that's strange. There's no text on there. So I suppose, Hope, I should have sent you a PDF. But that's okay. We can just look at the pictures for now, and then we will send you the PDF of the slideshow so you guys can see all the verbiage. So as Kristen mentioned, this context provides a broad historical overview of women's history in Nevada. It's not the entire history, and even if it were, I mean, we couldn't possibly discuss everything that women have done in the state in this little context. And of course, we're going to emphasize the themes of suffrage and women's rights. So we'll spend some time discussing the campaign for women's suffrage that culminated in the ratification of the 19th Amendment, with the knowledge that the amendment only guaranteed suffrage to white women. And so with this in mind, we also want to investigate historical efforts to extend suffrage to all women, regardless of race, both before and after the passage of the 19th Amendment. And then finally, we'll be discussing women's rights through 1980. And we're defining women's rights as the various efforts to improve the lives of women and their family in Nevada. And we're just going through 1980 because that's really kind of the bulk of the women's rights movement happened through the 1970s. And so we felt like that's a good cutoff. Oh, and also we're starting with the Nevada Territory. So around 1850 or so. And so our ultimate goal is to identify historic properties that are associated with these themes. We want to provide that framework for nominating significant women's rights and suffrage associated properties to the National Register. So this document, as Kristen mentioned, does not itself nominate any properties to the register. It's just a framework. See, we can go ahead to the next slide. And of course, these nominations themselves, they can be written by almost anyone based on this historical context. So nominations can be used to nominate the properties to local historic registers as well. I know Carson City has a local one. So this could help inform that and could also help provide content for historical markers and other interpretive projects. And we'll go on to the next slide, please. Did you want to jump in, Alicia? And unmute yourself first.
She's not even up on the screen, Zoyan.
Oh, I can see her right now. Okay, well, that's strange. All right, well, anyway, we'll just go on.
Okay, wait, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna attempt to talk. Sorry, folks, I'm Alicia, I'm up here in Reno, and I don't know, there's some kind of strange things happening in the forest between here and Carson today. So I think that we are talking about one of the additional tasks, which is compiling additional documentation regarding the women's suffrage movement and other significant women's history that occurred in the Nevada State Capitol or on the Capitol grounds, like Kristen mentioned. And so that's going kind of beyond the stories that we know already, you know, Hannah Clapp and the Commission for Defense. But we want to talk about legislators and staff and clerks and other types of events, you know, parades, incidents that might have occurred on the grounds that pertain to women's history. And so that will allow us to make recommendations for whether that existing National Register listing should be expanded to include topics related to women's history. And our next slide. Okay, so Anne, you want to take over here? So Anne, did you want to take over there?
Yes, sorry. So this slide is titled Role of Prospective Users. You can't see this because of whatever little bug is happening with our PowerPoint. But as a CLG, you all are part of our prospective users group. So as part of our outreach plan, we identified different groups of stakeholders. We identified certified local governments like you as prospective users of the historic context, along with state and federal agencies that manage cultural resources and also history and historic preservation groups. So as a prospective user, what are we looking for from you? First of all, we're asking you to assist us with defining your commission's goals, issues, and priorities for the final product. We know that the context could potentially guide future surveys or nominations in Carson City, or also help with other local preservation planning activities. So with that in mind, we're really interested to know what the commission might need in the finished document, and if you have specific goals or priorities for what's included. Basically, we're asking, what do you need to make this document most useful for you? We're also looking at challenges or issues we might encounter as this project unfolds, and we're asking you to help us identify those as well. This can relate to the document itself or how you foresee Carson City or the public interacting with the document. And then finally, we're asking you to help us identify existing properties that are associated with the themes of women's suffrage and women's history, or women's rights, that may be potentially eligible for the National Register. And next slide, please. Oh, you're muted.
Okay. Sorry, folks. All right, we want to tell you a little bit about our research plan. So a major aim, of course, in us writing the context is to try to synthesize the stories of individual women and communities and time periods, so we can try to convey a really broad understanding of historic patterns. And so to do that, we're mostly going to be conducting secondary source research, just for time reasons, really more than anything. But we are going to be consulting primary sources as needed. If we need to confirm some facts or bridge some gaps in the information, there's been a lot of good work done on women's history in Nevada, but there's definitely some places where maybe certain geographic areas aren't discussed too much, time periods. So we have a long list of archival sources, and we've been talking to the archives already to see what they hold, so we know where we need to look to try to find some of that information. And we're not really going to know that too much until we get into it. We're really right at the beginning of our research right now. We know that we're seeking more diverse perspectives to try to synthesize into the final historic context, including that of
those of Latinx, African American, Native American, LGBT, other marginalized ethnic and social groups throughout the state. And so it'll be a real advantage that I'm up here in the north and Zoanne is down there in the south. So if you need to visit archives and communities, we'll be able to do that more easily. And enlist some of our partners throughout the state too. So we're compiling a timeline of events also. That's another thing that we're working on that will go in the final context. And there are some others who have compiled already some really excellent resources for that, especially on suffrage, including the Nevada suffrage timeline that Dana Bennett and Mona Reno put together. And that's a really great timeline that's online now and has a lot of links to primary documents. So that's kind of the basic parameters of how we're going about our research. Our next slide.
So we developed a fourfold outreach plan to ensure engagement with stakeholders and the wider public throughout the span of the project. This plan includes inviting prospective users of the context, that's you, to again assist us in identifying those goals, priorities, and issues. Also, involving academic and professional historians, architectural historians, and scholars with specific expertise in Nevada and U.S. women's history. This group will be reviewing our literature list, suggesting additional sources, and also reviewing the final draft. We're also casting a pretty wide net to try and involve any interested individuals, organizations, or agencies. We really want to find anyone in the state who can help us identify extant historic properties. And then finally, we want to provide stakeholders with a platform for sharing all the information that they have and any resources that are relevant to the context. And so for that, we're using a Google form. It's really easy. You just click on the link and you can fill in any suggestions you might have. We have that included in the PDF presentation that I'll be sending to Hope, and she'll distribute to you guys. And that's a really, really easy way to be able to share any suggestions with us. Next slide, please. And so we also wanted to share our survey plan with you. Our survey goals include defining expected property types and also identifying specific properties that are potentially eligible for the National Register. And our methodology for identifying these properties includes consulting the National Votes for Women Trail, the National Register of Historic Places, the State Register of Historic Places, local registers, and also those suggestions that we get from you in that Google form. We'll also be including properties that we come across during our research. And so this identification process will also involve figuring out whether these resources are still standing or if they've been destroyed. And then the next step will be conducting a reconnaissance level survey of properties that are still standing to document their attributes, integrity, and condition. And just a note, due to time and budget constraints, not all identified resources associated with the historic context will be surveyed. Rather, it's going to be a preliminary and non-exhaustive sample of properties that through our research, we decide is most representative of important historical events, trends, and themes in Nevada women's history. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's see. This is our project timeline. So just to kind of give you an idea of the timeline we're looking at the end of this month, beginning of October, we are sending our preliminary list of sub-themes, property types, and potential resources over to SHPO. But of course, this is preliminary. The process is ongoing, so I'm sure we will be adding stuff as it goes along. And then by February, we will have a draft for our experts group to review. And that first draft is due to the SHPO in April. And then by May, we'll receive our first comments from SHPO. and we'll have that final draft to them by the end of June. And so, as we mentioned, different ways to contribute. The Google form is probably the easiest way, but you all are welcome to contact us by phone or email. The next slide has our contact information. And so, yeah, thank you guys so much for your time, and let us know if you have questions or input. We're really excited to work with you guys on this.
Anyone have any questions?
Will we receive the draft or when you send it to SHPO, or in February when you had that draft together?
We won't be sending it, we won't be distributing a draft out in a widespread way, but we'll be happy to kind of discuss the progress of it. We're going to be working with the Nevada historians and the women's history historians in particular. With our group is going to be reading through the draft and looking at it in a couple of different stages.
It'd be nice if you could give us a summary of what you find in Carson City at some point along the way. It sounds like a great project, very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do that. Thank you.
Michelle, do you have anything?
So, Alicia or Zoanne, or maybe Kristen, did you mention something about you're going to update the National Register nomination for the Capitol?
Part of our scope is to provide recommendations for if that should be updated with additional information pertaining to women's rights and suffrage in particular.
Okay, I think that's great.
You've done a lot of work in that arena, so I'm sure that will be part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add, we don't know if there's enough concrete information to do an amendment. We suspect there is, but hopefully this will tell us definitively. But the actual nomination update isn't part of the scope. But we can certainly go for that soon, hopefully. That could be a great CLG grant.
Any other commission member questions or comments? Well, thank you, guys. We look forward to seeing the document, and I think as any of us have any ideas, Jed, it seems like with your mom's efforts, Jed may have some good insights into women's activities in the state. So we'll coordinate through Hope and hopefully get you guys stuff that will add to the project. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a great night. Do you need me to stick around for anything?
If you want to stay for our next one, we're looking at the Section 106 report for the 100-foot monopole on South Carson. The addendum to it.
I'll listen in.
Okay.
Our next item is F3 HRC 2020-0010 for possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding an amended Section 106 technical report prepared due to federal permitting for a 100-foot monopole on property zone general commercial and located at 4209 South Carson Street, APN 009-125-24. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant prepared a Section 106 report for the 100-foot monopole at 4209 South Carson Street. The HRC, as a consulting agency, reviewed this report at its meeting of May 14th, 2020, and found that it did not adequately identify historic properties within the indirect area of potential effects for visual effects. The applicant prepared an addendum to the report to consider the 1960s residences along East Rovatini Way and Center Drive. With the additional consideration, the report concluded that the proposed project will not result in an effect to a historic historic architecture or archaeological resources. Sean Simpson, who prepared the addendum and the original report as well, and who was with you on May 14th, I believe, is in the room on the phone. And this is before the commission because you did ask for this supplemental information. So this is an opportunity for you as a consulting agency to provide additional comment if you'd like to.
Thank you, Hope. Are there any commission member comments, questions of Sean?
I appreciate the extra review time that he spent looking at the 1960s properties. I think that's a kind of an underrepresented resource in the city, and I agree with his conclusions that the vegetation around those buildings and some of the changes probably will obscure the tower from where the buildings are located, but it gave us a little bit more information about a resource that we don't know very much about. So I appreciate his time and effort providing that information.
Kristen, question for you, since you're the CLG coordinator. On these cell tower applications, should we be looking at properties that meet the age criterion, not just listed properties or previously inventory properties?
So that's a one. FCC projects, cell towers and cellular co-locations of antennas are tricky because there's nationwide programmatic agreements in place that exempt them. It's basically a streamlined process through the FCC programmatic agreements that basically says they don't have to identify things that are not previously evaluated or listed. If you read the FCC PAs, it says they need to identify listed properties or properties that have previously been determined eligible with SHPO concurrence. However, they do have the responsibility for conducting outreach and contacting the local governments and the tribes and the general public and all the same groups that they would be contacting otherwise under Section 106. And so it's within your right as that local government and a CLG to if you're concerned about the project, you would ask them for more information, and that's okay to do. But they are different. Section 106 projects for FCC cell towers do not follow the same rules that a lot of the vast majority of other 106 undertakings follow because of those programmatic agreements. And if you guys don't already have a copy of those PAs, we can certainly get them to you. They might even be on our website, but if not, we can get them to you so you have them on file so you can reference them. Maybe Sean can speak to that as well, coming from a consultant's perspective.
Hello, can people hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything you say. We're just trying to satisfy the commission and see what their concerns are.
Okay, so my understanding is we can, as a certified local government, we can go a little bit beyond the programmatic just to make sure our concerns are met.
Correct.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you for taking care of that, Sean. It addressed our comments anyway, and I'm glad you put that extra effort in. Is there any other question?
No problem, sir.
Is there any other, whoops, go ahead. Are there any other questions or comments from the commission? Is there any public comment on this item?
I see no public comment, Mr. Chair.
I'll entertain a motion.
If the commission is satisfied, you're a consulting agency, and so we'll just correspond that you found the report to be adequate. If you want a motion to that effect, you can certainly do that, but I don't know that's necessary.
it's itemized as discussion and possible action, so if we just, you want a motion to accept the report, we can probably just go with that and get a letter out.
I move to approve the amended report for HRC 2020-0010 and direct the staff to prepare a letter and summation of that, of our findings.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Sean. And thanks for your input.
Thank you very much.
Kristen.
No problem. Anytime.
No problem.
Next item is F4, HRC 2020-027 for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the 2021 Historic Preservation Fund, HPF grant. Hope.
Thank you. Every September, we put this on your agenda for discussion. The grant is due January 2021, so this is an opportunity to start brainstorming about potential projects. The HPF grant is a 40% match. So I'm aware there's been a lot of interest by the commissioners in pursuing a survey. I just don't know how we're going to be able to make a match. So although I recognize it would be great to have a survey of the properties on the east side updated and update our west side survey and possibly expand the district on the west side based on the outcome of the survey, I just don't know how we make the match. I did speak with Lindsay Boyer. Here, I keep looking. There she is. Lindsay Boyer is our open space manager, so I should introduce her. And part of her responsibilities is the Silver Saddle Ranch. And she's currently working on the Silver Saddle Ranch Preservation Plan. And so this plan will include maintenance of some barns and other buildings on the property. So one thing I wanted to mention in this brainstorming session is to consider working cooperatively with Parks, Rec, and Open Space staff to seek HPF funding to implement the Silver Saddle Ranch Preservation Plan. And if it's okay with the commission, Lindsay's prepared to explain to you in more detail what this preservation plan will involve.
Thank you, Hope.
Good afternoon. For the record, Lindsay Boyer, Open Space Manager for Carson City. Thank you for having me here tonight. So as Hope mentioned, I just wanted to share with you a little bit more about this preservation plan that we're preparing, as well as provide you a little bit of background on how we came to put this plan together. So for those of you who don't know, Silver Saddle Ranch was transferred to Carson City in 2015 through the and the lands transferred under this act came with some restrictions, including a programmatic agreement between Carson City and the State Historic Preservation Office. And that gives procedures and requirements for completing Section 106 review when doing any projects on these lands that were transferred. And these lands of Silver Saddle, as well as a few other areas that were transferred to us, are also under a conservation easement between Carson City and the BLM, which provides guidelines on allowable and prohibited activities and action items, and basically it's all aimed at preserving the conservation value of the property. So we have a few layers of restrictions on Silver Saddle Ranch. So because of the programmatic agreement that we have between us and SHPO, it's pretty restrictive in that we need to go out for cultural review pretty much any time we do a project out there. And because there's lots of buildings and things, there's actually quite a lot of maintenance needs that need to be taken care of. So the State Historic Preservation Office recommended that we put together a preservation plan and do a full architectural review of the structures out there. To determine, which are eligible to be historically, and to identify kind of some maintenance needs for some of the buildings out there, and to possibly come up with a list of projects that could be approved in advance, so we wouldn't have to complete Section 106 every time we need to do some basic maintenance activities out there. So with that in mind, we worked with Michelle Schmitter, who I believe is on this commission, and she put together this awesome preservation plan for us. It was completed in the summer of 2019, and it's pretty extensive. It includes quite a lot of background and history of the property, which is very cool, an opportunity for some really great interpretation in the future. But the sort of meat and potatoes of the plan really go structure by structure and identify some different issues that are occurring that, relate to the age of the buildings and deterioration. And she provides us with some recommendations on what we can do to mitigate some of those issues. So then the idea there was that we would take this plan and we'd submit it to SHPO and receive their approval. And then from there, we would be able to operate off of this plan and start doing some of those more routine activities. Some of the bigger items, like roof repair, would probably still need to go under review by SHPO. So the plan has been submitted to SHPO. We received comments back from them in February of this year. And they had some edits and changes and suggestions, things they wanted to see. And so right now, we're just working on incorporating all of those edits, and we'll be getting a finalized version back to them for review and approval. So this potential grant opportunity is great. Great timing, because we'll have this plan fully executed and approved by the time the grant comes around, and we'll be able to submit a whole suite of activities that we'd like to do out there, primarily aimed at preserving the actual structures and arresting things like rust and things like that are happening, putting in potentially some French drains to get the structures a little bit of protection from the elements. So just a suite of things that she identified that the various buildings need. So I guess with that, I'll take any questions.
And again, this was just, it looked like a really good opportunity where Parks has this preservation plan that will be hitting the finish line fairly quickly. So looking at the time frame on the 2021 HPF grant vis-a-vis what PROS is working on at Silver Saddle Ranch, I just wanted to bring that forward. I'm grateful that Lindsay was able to join us tonight and speak more specifically to it, because I think it's an exciting opportunity to protect a resource in the city. Having said that, I'm open to other ideas. This is to be a brainstorming session. We do have time before we have to decide what type of grant we'd want to pursue. And also, we'd want to talk to SHPO in advance about what we're contemplating to ensure it would qualify.
Kristen, can we use the HPF grants for some of that brick and mortar work out there, like roof repair or fixing, or metal repair, siding repair, things like that?
So yes, brick and mortar is an allowable type of project. I don't know what our priority projects are going to be defined as, but sometimes we do that. We'll identify certain priorities that might line up with our statewide plan or our statewide priorities, and so we'll say, this cycle we're really looking for survey or in nomination, but that's more of a, like I say, that's more of a, just to let you know that those are our priorities, and I don't know if our new grant cycle will contain that language or not. But brick and mortar work is indeed allowed with the CLG grant money.
Thank you. Any other commission member comments? We've done lots of survey under the CLG grants. One of the issues we do have, as Hope mentioned, is finding the match. Community development contributes their time to it. It's what, is it 50%, Hope? Is that right?
It's a 40%
40.
match.
And in the past, we've had commission members who have kicked in a lot of their time on some of these projects too. So we have to keep that in mind, because it's the funding we get needs to be leveraged with matching time and effort on our part. So Any ideas?
I think it sounds like a great idea to help out with the actual restoration of buildings that are being used by the local community. I mean, Silver Saddle Ranch is used by a whole variety of people, hikers and bird watchers and things like that, and it's really a gem for the community, I think. So I think if we could add some money to helping you with restoration and maintenance work, that would be an awesome way to spend some money.
Why don't we continue this hope, and we can start working with Lindsay to see what she's thinking and see where we might be able to help out on this.
Right, and I just want to say, I know last year, I believe it was, and every time we talk to Rebecca Palmer, surveys are a priority, and they're a priority for this commission. I've heard it. And I think it would be so valuable to update our surveys and maybe survey new areas. I just don't know where to find the match. And I'm happy to follow up with Kristen and brainstorm and see if she has ideas, but that's our challenge. 100% we'd love to be updating surveys.
Yeah, if you can think of anything, Kirsten, let us know, because that's one of the issues that we've had in the past, is just struggling to get that match on these projects. It's becoming more and more expensive to do those inventories, and that just brings up the match cost as well.
I totally understand, and you're not alone. I'll think about it. Maybe, yeah, like Hope said, maybe we can have a brainstorming session to think of a like kind type match that at least partially addresses it. I don't know. It's a tough one. I agree.
Okay, so let's just continue this item, and we'll start working with Lindsay and see where we can go on Silver Saddle.
So I'll schedule this for your next meeting as well and give an update and let you know if I've learned anything about funding matches for the survey, and as well as kind of better dial in on how we can help with Silver Saddle Ranch.
Thanks, Hope. Thanks, Lindsay. Next item is G, staff reports, discussion only. Hope.
Okay, I did not bring a staff report tonight, but I'm happy to email you all with anything the chair has approved since your last meeting.
Yeah, because I need to remember.
All I could think of is the artificial turf. That's the only one coming to mind.
Did you do approval for the deck that was over on Telegraph Street?
I believe we
Then
did.
Nevada and Telegraph, the one that came to you all and you didn't approve it because it was photographs and not plans, that one?
No, Telegraph and Elizabeth Street.
I don't recall.
I believe we did.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Peggy and Carter Tweet's old place that sold to June Joplin, and they added a deck out to the side with some lights, so.
I'll get you a list.
Commission member reports or comments? I've talked to a few people while walking just around town, and there's some concern about property maintenance in the district. There's a few houses, including the Hannah Clapp house right across from the governor's mansion, that are, the properties themselves aren't being necessarily neglected, but the landscaping has really gone. And I know with COVID, it might be tough for some people to keep up their properties, but I think it'd be nice if we could start looking at some way to help. I mean, if it is an economic issue, if there's some way we can help those people, or if we have some kind of carrot that we could throw in front of them to at least keep the properties in reasonable shape. I mean, turn water on and get lawns green again or mowed or things like that. So I think it's something we might want to look at soon, because they're going to get worse. And once the landscaping goes, the house probably isn't far behind. So.
Question for you, is that something maybe we ought to have a conversation with like the city manager about? Being maintenance people or the water, I mean, that kind of stuff, all under his purview, I imagine.
Yeah, it'd be a good idea to meet with Nancy and maybe start getting some ideas, because I know, I mean, it's the general public who are seeing it, and as soon as they know your connection with the commission or interest in history, they bring it up, so maybe if you could facilitate that, that'd be a good idea.
And the Hannah Clapp House, it's been looking like that for a long time, and I know the guy's still living there. And then the house on Robinson Division is a big concern, because I know 2 years ago he was still living there upstairs, but I think he was in his 90s or something like that. And whenever code enforcement would look into it, they'd get the lawns mowed and everything and not realize what was going on.
Yeah, just as an outside view and a pickup on what you're saying, 10 days ago, I had an architectural firm here to tour Minden in Carson City. And when we got done, the comment was made, wow, Minden is so crisp and clean and neat. And I go through this historic district in Carson City, and it really kind of to start to focus on the landscaping and a deteriorated look. And that was from somebody, I didn't ask for his opinion, her opinion, there was two of them, but they said there's a real noted difference in the two communities in what they would consider to be the historic districts around the park in Minden and in our west side. So it was funny that you bring that up, because, and I'm going, whoa. And then I started looking at it differently. I went, wow, it is in a little bit of disrepair. And most of it was hinged on landscaping.
Yeah, and the two prominent ones are in pretty substantial or important parts of the district too. I mean, if you're walking around and go down Mountain Street, you're gonna hit one, and if you take a right and go down Robinson, you're gonna hit the other one, so. And there's really beautiful properties around it, so I think we owe it to the adjacent property owners too, to make sure that they're doing the good work, and if we could help, we should.
Yesterday, the triplex and the duplex on Robinson and Division got painted. So, and there were flags out for sprinklers, so that one looks like it's coming along. A property across the street from me, they've really, got the sprinklers working and everything else. And the house next door to me, they actually planted 3 trees in the last weekend, and they had some old sandstone curbing in the garage, and they're lining the trees. So it's kind of contagious, and where June bought the place on Telegraph and Elizabeth, they're starting to bring that up, and even over the house that's right there on Elizabeth and across from June's place, the old sister houses, if you will, it looks like that's getting cleaned up a little at a time. So, I mean, there are some spots that are getting better.
Is there any public comment?
I see no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned with unanimous approval. Thank you.